Everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Women Serve 2. Today we have Ashley Sard with us. She is a proud Air Force veteran with 15 years of service as a medic. However, her dedication to the military began long before she would ever put on the uniform. Growing up in a military family, her father served in the Army's 82nd Airborne Division, and her younger brother followed in his footsteps. Service was a part of her identity from an early age. During her time in the Air Force, she was privileged to care for service members and their families, an experience that deepened her commitment to the well-being of those who serve. Today, that mission continues in a new form. As a community partnership specialist with Empath Health, she has the honor of supporting veterans through outreach, education, and advocacy. It's her passion to bridge the gap between our communities and the needs of those who serve, ensuring that no veteran is forgotten or underserved. So, Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show.
Having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So one of the things that I like the women to start off with is talking about their military service. So why did you join the Air Force? What did you do as a medic? And essentially overall your journey.
Okay. So it's kind of funny how it began, but I lived all over the place, right? My dad was in the Army, so I was always the new kid on the block. We moved everywhere, mostly throughout the state of Texas, but a lot in North Carolina since he was 2nd Airborne. But I distinctively remember him making a comment when I was in my teens, either you're going to college or you're joining the military. It's like, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to do what you do because I didn't really know much beyond that, if that was the only thing that you could do or not. So I did apply for college at the same college my mom went to, at Southwestern University, and I didn't get in. So I was like, all right, plan B. But funny enough, my dad was like, okay, I'm going to take you to the Air Force recruiter. I was like, okay, we're starting there. And he's like, no, you're going there. He's like, for you, there's only the Air Force. But mind you, back then it was right before 9/11 and we were in El Paso. He was a first sergeant, very just, stern, and he was trying to protect me is how I see it. He might have had a different way of explaining it. So we went to the recruiter's office and I had no idea what to expect. I told my dad, I said, I want to do something medical, hands-on. I really thought it was cool what, paramedics did. I knew that I couldn't jump out of airplanes because I was terrified of heights. I don't do roller coasters. I wasn't that kind of thrill seeker. So he's like, look, I promise you we'll get something that you really enjoy. And so long story short, I got an aerospace medical technician, which is a 4N, and went through basic training in San Antonio, went through tech school in Wichita Falls, and then back to San Antonio for my hands-on training. And from there, my first duty station was in Arkansas, which I thought was going to be awful because I'm, I consider myself a city girl, but it has a lot to offer. It's beautiful landscape, if you like the outdoors, which I didn't really get introduced to the outdoors until I met my husband, who I met in Arkansas. And that's when things kind of changed. So we spent 6 years there. I was in all kinds of different clinics. And then we got orders to Okinawa, Japan, and we were there for 4 years. And that's kind of where the peak, I feel like that's where I really felt like I was doing what I was trained to do. I was at the fire department, and the fire department overseas is a lot different than it is anywhere else because you're mixed in with the local nationals and they ride on the fire trucks and the ambulance with you because we responded outside the military installation. We actually had this massive grid where we responded from north all the way down to mid-south. And I know Okinawa is a small island, but it's jam-packed full of stuff. And so that's really where I felt my calling. I was getting a lot of hands-on, some really tough calls as a young, airman to have to experience. But I feel like that was what really pushed me to want to continue to help and serve others. I got to deliver a couple babies because there was just, it's funny because, they say there's something that, and people don't believe me unless they've been to Okinawa, but there's something about when a typhoon or monsoon hits that the barometric pressure drops. And that causes babies to just want to come out. And I've seen it. When we were there, we were stationed there from 2000. So my son was born in 2009. So 2007 to 2011. And I don't remember what year it was, but there was an earthquake that hit mainland Japan, and it caused a big tsunami. So we were sent to mainland to grab all of the women that were third trimester active duty, and we had to bring them to Okinawa because they didn't have the services. So basically to prepare them if they were going to give birth, that they were in a safer location, they weren't in the impact zone. That was really cool. I really enjoyed that. we were there for 4 years. We had our son, and then we thought that coming back stateside would be, be closer to family, but it in reality didn't work out that way because, I thought everybody would want to come visit us in Florida because there's so much to do here, but not really what happened. So, but we got stationed in Tampa, and I kind of finished up my career on MacDill, did a little other clinical things, and then I was medically retired after 15 years, started having some pretty significant health issues. And then, the transition began from military to civilian. So starting that next chapter. Which I don't know about you, and I think I hear it a lot from us women, a lot of people that serve, but I think specifically women, it was a hard transition because we went from having that camaraderie, our girlfriends, that we talk to every day. And I don't think it was anything personal for the most part, but I think it was just natural. You go into work, you see your girls, hey, how's it going? It was just common. And then when you're not going on to the installation every day, it takes effort. You have to reach out to them or they have to reach out to you. And it just wasn't getting reciprocated. And that was 9 months of absolute hell for me. I mean, I felt like I lost friends. I didn't know what I was going to do. I definitely wanted to go right into work. I didn't want to have any downtime. I was just worried that I was going to, if I was going to take time off and not want to ever do anything, go back to work, or, I wouldn't get hired to do something that I wanted to do. So I was one of those nerds that I got my resume done. I carried it everywhere with me, and everywhere I went, it doesn't matter if it was at Publix. I'm like, hey, I was in the military. If you're hiring, here's my resume. And literally about 9 months later, I got hired to work in the IT department at MacDill as their training specialist for their medical records. I don't know about each branch, but for some reason, the Air Force had 7 different ones. Crazy insane, but it just kind of fit because I already knew all of them. So I did that for about 4 years. Got a lot of OJT in IT. It's well, maybe I should pursue my Security Plus. So I got my Security Plus, and I was like, well, I still don't really I don't know what I want to be when I grow up still. I'm kind of just, dipping my feet in different waters. But eventually after that, I was like, I really like interaction with people, but I like helping people. I didn't think that I could go back into the EMT realm because physically I just had some stuff going on, and my kids were also little at the time. So I didn't want to be working those 24-hour shifts. I got a position at the VA, James Haley, for the Women Veterans Program. And at the time it was a kind of just a program support assistant. So admin kind of do whatever they need me to fill in. But I realized very quickly that, they had outreach, but no one was really doing it. I think someone was just afraid to kind of take the first step. I've never been afraid to do that. I've always had a big voice. Sometimes it got me in trouble, but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to jump in and do it. And so I ran with it. And it was astonishing to realize how many women didn't even know that we had a women veterans program at our VA, that we actually have one at every single VA. It's a requirement, and then just getting the word out to the rest of the world, even the VA staff, a lot of them didn't know that we had a women veterans program. So I worked really hard to get that word out and try to get the women to let them know that we have a program for them. We even had a designated building for them with their own special entrance, very private. So I did that for 3 years. And then we'll just say I had to pivot a little bit in January. And Empath Health was a partner that I had worked with during other outreach opportunities. So I knew who they were. I knew their mission. I knew, that they provided hospice. Beyond that, I didn't really know much about them, but I knew that I enjoyed working with their outreach specialists, and it just worked out. I left the VA, and then I joined Empath back in May. So I haven't even been with them for a year, but I feel like I've been with them for several years because it was just that easy of a transition. It's so different going from government work to nonprofit. I'm not bashing anybody. They were very warm and welcoming. And at the time, my counterpart, Carlos, was the only veteran on the team. So it was nice to add an additional veteran to the team to cover Hillsborough County and to really, once again, run with that, push it out there, let people know, hey, we have veterans here. So I had the opportunity to really, I knew that once I left the VA, they weren't going to backfill that slot. They actually abolished it. So when I got hired, one of the things that I was very adamant about was the programs that I ran at the VA, I want to continue under Empath, like our coffee socials, our outreach opportunities. they were for it. They were like, too easy, run with it. And it was so easy because there was literally no red tape. I have a supervisor that fully supports me. So it has been just wonderful, absolutely wonderful to work with them. Just a true blessing. So I finally feel like I'm where I should be.
I love that because you hit so many things on the head, right? Transitioning out. And I say this all the time. I think that was probably one of my hardest things, was trying to transition from being in the military to figuring out what you want to do in life. And even, I mean, I've been out since 2017-ish. It took me so many years to still try to figure out what to do. And I was like, well, maybe I'll do this. And I was like, nah, it's not like hitting my purpose in life. Or, like, when you put on the uniform, you're working for something greater than your own. And I think that's why we veterans and service members always have such pride, because we're working towards something bigger than us. And then when we get out, we're like, okay, well, we're not serving that purpose anymore. Like, what is my purpose? And I don't think the military does a very good job with transitioning, from active duty to the civilian world. I mean, I know we have TAPS, but I don't know about your experience, but my experience was, okay, well, here, let's build a resume and we'll send you off on your way. And I was like, okay, cool. And now, especially with AI, you could just chat GPT, be like, hey, make my resume. And then boom. So now it's like, I think they need to add in that maybe emotional factor in, and like self-discovery, or try to narrow down, like, okay, what do you want to do after you leave the military? Why do you want to do it? Maybe something a little bit more self-reflective, instead of, hey, here's a resume, go out to see what job you could get. And then another thing you also hit on, which I speak upon all the time with my husband, is thinking that people are going to visit you as a military family. So we met in Germany. So we were stationed in Germany, overseas. Probably the cheapest way to travel is when someone's already over there, because you have lodging already covered. And then we had a car, but one person came to see us, and it was 2 months before we left. And because I was guilt tripping people, I was like, we're leaving Europe and we've been here for 3 years. Then we went to Travis Air Force Base, California, right outside Napa. Barely anyone came to see us. Eglin, same thing. Nobody barely even saw us. Las Vegas, nobody really ever saw us. And then, so now we're in San Antonio, and we're like, okay, well, we don't have family around. And it's like, we're so much closer compared to being overseas, that why is nobody coming to see us? And I think that also was something that my husband and I talked about too. It's like, okay, why are we still stateside? Like, we still want to travel the world. We want to give our kids that opportunity as well, because nobody sees us stateside. So why are we still here? So I don't know if that's something that you also experienced as well.
100%. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I think we assume that because we're overseas, maybe that's why family's not coming to see us. It's too expensive, And I think we based a lot of our traveling opportunities or missed opportunities on that. And if I could say, that's probably the only regret I have. Like when we were in the military, we could have traveled a lot more, but we kind of limited ourselves because either, mom couldn't, it wasn't a good time for her, or, wanting to go see aunts and uncles, it wasn't a good time for them. For me, if someone says I'm coming in September, I am stopping everything. I'm making it work. Like it floors me and it angers me so much to think that we have family. Like, we don't have any in Florida. So I feel ya. I have family in Texas. I have family up on the East Coast, and I have family over in Spain that I've never even met. But, we think about that too. Like, what if something were to happen to us? We don't have anybody local that's family. So I think we've kind of redirected, and we're like, you know what? It doesn't have to be family. You make those lifelong friends. And I know that. Like, it's just such a small world. I've run into so many people here, especially when I was at MacDill as a contractor, that I was stationed with at other locations. And we may not talk every day, but it is just nice to have that familiarity. And then you make those new connections. With Empath, there's a lot of volunteers that work for Empath and a lot of volunteers that volunteer their time, right? So it's a little different setting, whereas the VA, a lot of the staff are veterans. We don't have so many at Empath, but I will say that they are all very empathetic. and they want to know, they want to learn, they want to hear the stories because they know that we have the second highest population. I think Texas has the highest population of veterans and we're right behind you. But I think it's the transition, like with TAPS, it was a total joke for my husband because he retired when COVID hit. So it was, you sit behind a computer for 5 days and some, speakers didn't even show up. So he, and the TRICARE portion for me was the most important because you go from having complete and total free benefits to, well, depending on what you did, how long you served, this is how much you're going to pay. If you're going to have, your kids, there's so much. And I find that I think that they would do a lot better if they brought in some more of those, like the Career Source Tampa Bay we have here locally. They're a nonprofit, and that's all they do all day is they have veterans that will do your veteran. They'll take your resume, like basically, all of your awards and achievements, your DD 214, and they'll put it in that language that you need for civilian people, that are not veterans to understand, because I think we short ourselves because we don't have the degrees maybe, or we don't have those certifications, but we have all of that experience and we're driven. And it truly is a significant bonus that we have that only veterans have. We have that work ethic. And so I just think, I think there's a lot of things that could be improved, but I think TAPS is probably one of the biggest ones because that is your last opportunity to sponge everything in that you need to know. Maybe they could even have done like a post TAPS for vets. Here's the TAPS for active duty as you transition out. And then maybe a year later, if you're still trying to figure life out, here's a TAPS for you as a veteran. And that's where they kind of integrate the VA, the Women Veterans Program, and all these other services that are out there that veterans don't know about.
That's actually a really good idea because I think, and I know for me, like I just wanted to get the hell out at the time because like I just had really bad leadership and I was like, I'm just done. Like I palace chased 6 months. I didn't even want to finish my 6 months. Like I was just like, just send me into the reserves. Like that's how bad I wanted out. So, but then I think it was also the hardest transition because I thought I knew what I wanted to do and it just wasn't working out the way that I was hoping, which is why I also think I was struggling. And also like dual mill too, right? I was very limited on where I could potentially go. So I initially thought I was going to be a lawyer. I'm not, but I initially thought that. And my only opportunity, we were in Vegas at the time, and my only opportunity was to go to UNLV because there was no, at the time, and I don't know if it's changed, but at the time there was no online law school. Like you had to physically go there. And so UNLV was my only option. And I did not get in and I applied twice. So it was like, okay, well, now what do I do? Because now my husband's transitioning to commissioning side and now we're moving every 2 years and we're trying to start a family. So now I'm like still feeling lost because I'm like, okay, well, I had aspirations to do X, Y, and Z. And then that's obviously not working out. So I think that is such a good idea. And you also hit something that I do want to talk about because you did work in the VA system is I also didn't know there was a women's health thing. And I think I started hearing about it more recently because they actually did call me a few months ago. And I thought it was because I was trying to increase my VA rating. And I was like, why the fuck does the VA want to call me? But then they were like, hey, just to let you know, like we have these resources. And I was like, oh, okay. So I also didn't know that. And if it wasn't for this podcast, I also wouldn't know that women veterans could also deliver their kids at a VA hospital. And I think that is something that a lot of people didn't know. Like I sure as shit didn't know. So can you talk about some of the resources with the VA and then also what resources Empath has? Because I do know, as you mentioned, it's also a nonprofit. So talk about some of the resources each have and then what makes them different.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's totally true because, we try to talk about it as much as we can, but there's just so much information out there. I was mind blown when I held a resource fair at one of our women's centers and I invited all of our internal VA clinicians and programs and departments, as well as some of the nonprofits. We had claims, we had toxic exposure screeners, we had women's health to talk about maternity care benefits, because you're right. if you are pregnant or if you are active duty and as you are exiting the military and becoming a veteran and you're pregnant, there are services that the VA covers. They don't necessarily deliver babies at the locations, most of them, but they are connected in the community with various different hospitals and clinics that they'll refer you to for your OBGYN care. And then even a year after you deliver, the Women Veterans Program will continue to follow you to make sure, because we know that obviously after we have the babies, everything's not perfect, right? We have issues with, if you're trying to breastfeed or if you've got postpartum, or, just this, your body changes and you're just going through all these weird hormonal changes. So they have all of these services. But if you don't know, you don't utilize them, and they're free of charge. So what we started doing at the Tampa VA is we had baby showers. So all of the women that we followed, I think before I left back in May, they had upwards of like 315 women that were assigned to the James A. Haley VA that they followed. So whether they were currently pregnant or have had delivered and they were still following them a year postpartum, we made sure that they got items for baby showers, diapers, wipes. We get kits donated from the VFWs and the Columbiettes, handmade blankets, things like that. But it was our way of not only educating them, hey, that we have this service, but we would also throw in the nonprofit services, their flyers in there, so they would know that we have support groups outside the VA. We had perinatal loss programs, all of these different entities that women didn't know. And then even their our male veterans didn't know. So if you're a male veteran, and we're having the baby shower, they can get the baby shower items too. They're a veteran and they didn't know that they could come get their stuff if their wife, was having a baby. So it was just, I think for me, the frustrating part was like, how do I get the word out? How do we get all of this information out there? And I will tell you, for Texas, at least Bexar County, because I follow along with the Women Veterans Program in pretty much all of the different states. And I love what Texas does, because their Women Veteran Program, at least in San Antonio, she's very engaged, from doing coffee talks to virtual seminars. She's constantly bringing outside resources in. I think we have some competition for sure. I think every VA needs to step up. I think every VA needs to have a women veteran program that is willing to really put that out there, and bring in other resources. That's kind of where we fill in too as Empath, right? So when I go out and I do outreach and I talk to veterans specifically, my goal is not for them to say, you know what, I'm leaving the VA. Absolutely not. Stay with the VA. If you got your service connected disabilities and you're using your care, keep that. But you can double dip, right? Just like you can use your TRICARE benefits if you're retired. You can use our services. They're free. We have grief services. So mind you, our services are for anyone. They're not just for veterans. So I just want to put that out there. But veterans need to know that, if you have trauma that you've experienced and the provider that you see is a male and you can't see a female for various reasons, we have female providers that can talk to you, and we can do virtual. And oftentimes they find that more comforting because it's not in their medical record per se for the VA, and it's a different entity, right? And most of those providers, they haven't worked with a lot of veterans. And I feel like for me, it's almost easier to talk to someone that has no idea what I've gone through when it comes to the trauma side. We have a perinatal loss support group that we do as well. And that was really neat. Back in, I think it was November, the VA Women Veteran Program reached out and they were like, hey, we're still going to host the perinatal loss support. There's a Remembrance Day. I can't remember what day it is, but every year that I had been there, we had held something, right? With the candlelight, we'd share stories. They wanted to do it again, but they needed help. So I brought in our perinatal loss grief support, and they did the presentation. So yet another resource. So the women that were on there and the men, the male veterans that had lost a child, they had their VA there, and they also had Empath Health. So when it came to grief, another thing that I'm really proud of that Empath offers is the Blue Butterfly program. I didn't know a lot about it when I started, but every year they host a retreat in Thonotosassa, which is, it's out in the country. It's not close to me, but I believe it's 3 days, maybe 4. And it's for children, I think between the ages of 5 and 17. I could be wrong, but that information's on our website. But it's a free retreat. The parents just go online, they sign them up. And it's for those children who have experienced a loss. It doesn't matter what kind of loss that is, how the person passed, who they were to them. The child has experienced this traumatic event and they need help, or they need to be around other children who've experienced that grief. This retreat is free for them. They stay overnight. They get fed. If they're younger and they're not potty trained, they get help with that. We have volunteers that dedicate their time. We have grief services, social workers. I mean, it is such a whole, like, they literally just wrap their arms around them for those 3 days that they're there. And the children at the end of that retreat are just, they're so different afterwards because they've been able to experience the love and compassion that strangers can provide. And they're also around other children that have gone through the loss of losing someone. And I think just trying to get the word out about that, because we didn't fill up last year, so trying to let people know, look, if you have a child between those ages, veteran or not, you just go online when the registration opens. There's questions to fill out. It has nothing to do with insurance. It has nothing to do with how much you make. It is a free service that Empath does and our volunteers do out of the kindness of their heart. And I think that's something that I've tried to educate the VA on because I don't think that there's anything of that, that they offer. So combining forces, if there's a gap there that we can fill, if there's a gap that maybe they don't fit our category, we can provide them a community partner to go to. To me, it's all about making those connections. Even if Empath can't help them, I have a whole Rolodex of resources that I know somebody can provide that help to that person.
I love that it's also for the kids. I know they're so resilient, but at the same time, like, I look at my kids because my oldest is 7 and we're probably on our 3rd move. And so my heart breaks because, like, I'm uprooting him, or all the kids, but he's probably the most, right? All the time. And yes, we do think about the kids when it comes to, like, to the military people, but like if their mom or dad were killed in action, or, I know April is the month of the military child. And I know at least on base, they're pretty good with, like, the CDC talking about, like, the military child and celebrating the military child. But I think if a kid loses their parent, this would be, like, such a great opportunity to let them experience connection and love and stuff like that. So I love the whole connecting with, like, the VA because when I was younger, it was my mom's friend's son, but he got killed in action the same day his son was born. And so he grew up without a father. He was a Marine, killed in action in Iraq. And, like, just even though he never experienced a father, that's still a loss that he's never gonna know. Like, his dad died the day he was born. But I feel like so many more kids could benefit from that. Is Empath more, like, do you offer, like, telehealth type stuff, or is it just in Florida?
I wish we had it in every state. I'm sure there's other for and or nonprofits that offer similar services. But I will say, like, we are the full kit and caboodle, right? Because we have hospice, we offer palliative care, grief care, home health, durable medical equipment. We have an adult day center. We have one that's just for veterans as well. I mean, like I said, there's other hospices out there that are just hospice, but we really have that well-rounded approach. But yes, the downside is we're Florida and only Florida. And I say that because my grandparents both just passed away. My dad resides in Texas. He's been their caregiver for many years. For me, it would have been so much easier if he were in Florida, because I'm like, Dad, the company that I work for, I could get you guys taken care of right now, so easy. And it was such a painful process to watch him go through getting that hospice set up in Texas. And again, nothing to say of anything negative against any other company, but just me working for one, already knowing the ins and outs, I was just frustrated for him, and unfortunately, by the time he got hospice situated for them, they both passed away. But, that's not to say that we can't continue to educate people and let them know, because there is that common misconception that hospice is, I'm not ready for hospice. I'm only in my 30s. I don't need it. You don't know when it's going to happen. You just, mentioned, being killed in combat, or, God forbid, a suicide, somebody gets in a car accident. It's really important for us to educate everyone on the importance of having an advanced care plan, right? having a living will, having those medical surrogates, because the last thing you want to have to do when you pass is leave that on your family. You know, my kids are 17 and 13. I hate saying that, makes me feel so old, but I don't want them to have to go through that. You know, and I will say, working with empath, that has been very eye-opening for me. And I've had that conversation with my husband, like, hey, we need to make sure that we look at our will, make sure that it's up to date. You know, the people that we've assigned as immediate versus long-term caregivers, do we even still talk to them? Are they still alive? And these are just conversations that people need to have with each other, with their family members. And that's just another one of the services that we provide as what it says, CPS, Community Partnership Specialist, throughout the state of Florida that we cover. There's 14 of us. And we do these education presentations where we talk about advanced care planning. We talk about myths versus facts as far as hospice. We talk about our We Honor Veteran program. You know, we talk about so many different topics, but it's just mainly to put that bug in their ear so that hopefully they can go home and say, yeah, I attended this education, seminar today, and I really think we should have a conversation. You know, and I've provided the education presentations, and I mean, I literally, especially after I lost my grandparents, I called my mom. I said, Mom, I know you're young, and I know, you're doing everything that you can do, and you're killing it. But we need to have this conversation at some point, because I don't want that burden left on me either to have to make that decision. Because at the end of the day, you want to honor your loved one, right? But you also have emotions of your own. So if they don't want to be, resuscitated, but you're like, no, this is my loved one, we have to do everything we can to save them. That if that's not what they want, how do you make that decision? So having that legal document is so important. And that's just one of the conversations that we try to have, and we try to have it in a very light manner. So people don't leave there like, oh, wow, that's just heavy sitting on me. But more than, yeah, that's something that we could talk about. We can schedule a time to do a Zoom and get the family involved. So I think just being able to have that open conversation about the different things that are out there that we need to start thinking about, especially with kind of the world that we live in today.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things. Like, I don't have a will, but I probably should. Yes, I know. But you're right. Like, you don't know what happens or what could happen. And then who's going to take care of the kids, or who's going to take care of the financial aspect. And because things could happen in a moment's flash. And I think that is a good conversation to have, and it is an important one. And probably now, after this, I'm going to talk to my husband and be like, all right, what are we doing as far as like our kids and stuff? Because our parents are getting older. They probably don't want to take in 4 young kids. Not that they want it short term, but long term, like, they are getting older. And, okay, then who? So I do think that's a very important conversation. It is something, like, I'm kind of reframing it to be more proactive instead of reactive. And I think maybe that's what a lot more people should do, is think of it as being just more proactive, because you never know what is going to happen. And I know you mentioned Zoom. So do you reach out to the other states and kind of talk about this too? Or like, how are you doing your outreach with Empath?
So for Empath, I cover a county. We have specific counties that we cover. I say a county. I cover Hillsborough County, but for me, because I'm the only woman veteran on the team, if there are specific needs, so for example, we have a coffee social in Pinellas County. I wouldn't normally cover Pinellas, but it's a women veteran coffee social. They want to have it facilitated by women veterans. So I will travel to Pinellas and I will facilitate that. But I do the boots on the ground. I'm out there in the community. I'm at the VFWs, the Legions. I'm at these career fairs. I was at the, state fair. Set up a table there just to talk about our services. I use LinkedIn. I think that is, it's really hit the ground. I will go on there. That's how I found the young lady. I can't think of her name now, but she's with the Women Veteran Program in San Antonio. And I just went through and kind of looked to see what they were doing, what kind of different classes they were offering, the conversations. They had a whole seminar virtual on menopause, which I know is a curse word for us, but we don't get enough information about it. So I just go on there and I try to just find other entities that are providing services for either veterans or their family members. And I'll schedule these little Zoom calls and say, hey, what are you doing? And how can we help you too? Because sometimes it's a matter of just sharing each other's information. Joy Rowland, she was on one of the, I go to Eventbrite too. A lot of people are using Eventbrite nowadays for events. And there was a women entrepreneurial seminar event. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but I met a young lady on there, and she's an entrepreneur and wonderful services that she offers. I don't remember where she was, but these women were from all over the world. I mean, we had a young lady on there from Bangladesh, but their commonality is they're women, they're hard workers, and they were trying to start up their own thing, right? And so I set up a class and I was like, look, update your LinkedIn profile. If you're not even showing what you're currently doing, you don't have an updated headshot, no one's going to bother. So just that alone, they've just flown off. You know what I mean? And I think just sharing those little things that have worked for us, you know, for you and I and for others, sharing that knowledge, I think has been very helpful. And utilizing LinkedIn, because it's a professional setting, you don't have to worry about all the other jargon that's on there like you do with TikTok and Instagram and all that. And I think it's a great place to recognize other people that are doing great things out there, you know? So when I do events, I was at our Tampa Vet Center on Friday, and our outreach liaison, Mr. Wilfredo Flores, he facilitated Bay Area Legal. They came out, and I didn't know that they have services and a team dedicated just for veterans. So veterans that need help with divorce, paternity testing, things like that, eviction notices, a whole slew of things. They have a support team that's dedicated just for seniors, right? Because seniors have their own issues that they have to deal with. If I hadn't gone to that lunch and learn, I would not have known. So putting that information on LinkedIn that I attended it, what it was about, other people are like, oh, wow, you know, and they've already said, like, we have other people that want us to do seminars just so they can get the word out. So I think that's a lot of it too, is just sharing that information. And you know, if it's not something that you need, that's fine. But odds are somebody that follows you or someone that you run into in the community is going to need that information.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a very good way to network. And I think that's actually how we ended up meeting too, is, you know, having that professional, you know, connection. Believe it or not, like, the veteran community is small in its own. But anyway, it is so important to have that network. And I think the one thing that I also liked about LinkedIn too is if you like something, it automatically goes into the feed and it says this person liked this. So then you're spreading the information without having to constantly repost it or reshare it. And that way, like, it ripple effects more about our different resources.
100%. Yeah. And it helps you too, because like we're hosting a veteran resource fair in April 2nd at Career Source Tampa Bay. Career Source Tampa Bay is like a hidden gem. I don't know how. They offer free services to veterans. They have veterans there that can take your service and put it in kind of like a chat GPT, but a real person doing it, and put it in a format that is, you know, gonna get you a job. You know, they offer free classes, certifications. They do veteran networking groups every month where they bring in USAA and all these other companies. And a lot of times those members that attend, they get hired on the spot. This is it's a huge thing, right? So I was like, you know, let's partner up. I could have held this resource fair anywhere, but I was like, let's have it there. You have the space. You're in an area of town that a lot of veterans commute through or they live there. It'll bring, you know, advertisement to them, because I just think it's wonderful. I wish I had known about it when I got out, because I really was on the struggle bus trying to write my own resume and get all that done. But we're also, because it's not on VA property, I'm not limited. I can invite the VA, but because it's my show, I can have nonprofits, I can have for-profits. So we're having it fully catered. We're going to have raffle items, but like items that people can use, you know, not just a blender, right? Blankets, socks. We have a lot of homeless population here, and it does get cold in Florida. We had a full week of like teens and 20s. I don't like that. And so that, you know, I'm asking for the people that have the ability to bring those items. And we're hoping to have a couple hundred veterans, family members, and even active duty service members, you know, Blue Star families. We want our Gold Star families. We want we want as many people to come out because I've invited a little bit of everything. So there's going to be something there for everyone. And my goal is to just get everybody under that same roof for 4 hours. And if you even just get one piece of information that you walk out with, you're like, I did not know that, then I've done my job. And that to me that's what fills my cup up, is knowing that they didn't have that information. And even if they are there and they're like, I didn't know about CareerSource, I need to know more about them. And they sign up for, one of their learning sessions. Check. Love it. So that's what it's all about. It is hard. It is hard to get the word out because there are so many. We have a lot of different, veterans that are doing kind of their own podcasts and things like that. We have their own veteran nonprofits that are kind of doing their thing. I wish we could kind of come together more. I would love to have like your podcast. I love what you do. I would love to just have all of my women veterans here and share their stories and just push that out and combine forces. Because I think sometimes there's too many resources and things for people to utilize. And then they're like, well, crap, which one do I choose? So I think that having that community really helps too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, especially with like San Antonio being Military City, USA. Like when I started this podcast a couple years ago, one of the women, Amanda May, she does the Women Veteran Calendar and she's here in San Antonio. She's really big with working with the other groups as well too. So like the Women Veterans of San Antonio is its own group. But one thing that I will say that is really good with San Antonio is they don't try to do different things. They try to connect everyone and be like, okay, here's our resources. So I know with the VFW 76, so it's like the oldest post in Texas, but it's in San Antonio, and they do a lot of the women veterans do their events down at that VFW. And I know they're doing a Rosie the Riveter kind of thing for the women veterans in San Antonio. And one of the women who is running it, she reached out to me. She's like, do you have like resources that, we could tell the women veterans? Like she reached out to all these different groups and I was like, well, I'm just a podcast, so I'll come up with something. But I do agree. Like if we can combine forces and be able to provide all of these resources, then we don't have to, these people who are trying to look for answers don't have to like nitpick. And I think that is something that I feel like a lot more people should do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know there are specific things, that are specific to those states, right? But there's also a lot, like I said earlier, the Women Veterans Program. Every VA has one. Does every VA have a baby shower? Maybe not, right? But usually there's other things that they're doing. Like I said, I really like the ones in Texas because I think they've really hit the nail on the head with their target population, how they're getting the word out. They're using hybrid, and I got on a couple of their different, events, and I'm like, hey, I know I'm not in Texas. I'm a true Texan at heart. I worked at the Women Veterans Program, but I like what you're doing, and I want to see how I can help, either doing it in my new role here or passing that on to the Women Veterans Program at James Haley. Because yes, they lost me, they've lost a lot of people, but they still have a program to run. And even if I can't facilitate that, I think just giving them that information, I put the Women Veteran Program manager in connection with the one in Texas. And I was like, just pick her brain. There's so many things. Like it doesn't take that much time. You have to make a flyer and you have to get the word out, and I can help spread the word too. I just think that we have an enormous amount of resources, and because each state has kind of their own like Rolodex, like we have Hope, Florida. It's run by our Governor DeSantis's wife, Casey DeSantis. And I don't know where she got the idea, but kudos to her, because it's a one-stop shop. It has resources, VA, for-profit, nonprofit. And I will say, when I was at the VA and we got hit by 3 hurricanes, we definitely needed other entities to fill in the void when it came to, I was evicted, I lost my house. My children and I are living in a car. We're on the streets. Hope, Florida was able to fill in that void almost instantaneously. The VA has a process that they have to go through. Again, it might take longer. So there are other entities out there that can help even with TRICARE, even when you're waiting for a referral, there's other entities out there that can help. Our crisis line, if you are in a crisis, you can call them 24/7. And if you're a veteran, there's a specific number you dial and you get a veteran on the other end. There's so many things out there that can help. And I love the calendar. I know we tried so hard when I was at the VA, but what we kept bumping into was we couldn't solidify things far enough out, right? Trying to get planning done. We had the ideas, but trying to get the location nailed down, or, if something big came in town, or an inspection came in town, we were kind of bumped, because we weren't patient care necessarily. But I'm like, wow, this should be more important in my mind. We're sharing that resource and we're providing a service for veterans. So it was really hard to do, but that was my overall goal. I don't know if they'll ever get there, but I think that all the women veteran programs, if they could have a digital calendar on their website, you can click on this link to register, and join each other's, because there's a lot of different resources that we can share and, put out there that might be valuable and more valuable in one state than the other.
That's actually a good idea to do like a virtual calendar, or like a ever rolling calendar. That's actually a really good idea. I'm going to have to look more into that. Because that's actually a really good idea, because that's how you're going to spread the word. And regardless of wherever the location is, Zoom is such a big thing now. Like, you don't have to physically be somewhere to get that information. I do want to talk about the Veteran History Project. So what is that and why does that matter?
So that is an initiative, and I think I might have my little flyer somewhere. Yeah. Just because it's so important. So this is the little flyer that you can get, and it goes through the National Archives. So I'll just tell you, it's the United States Congress created the Veteran History Project back in 2000 as a part of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. And essentially it collects, preserves, and makes accessible firsthand stories, basically, of U.S. military veterans from World War I through the most recent conflicts. Anyone, including students age 15 or older, can volunteer to participate. They have a whole knowledge kit of what you'd have to go through. There's a little training session. But one thing we're trying to do, obviously for me as a female veteran, is I want more female veteran stories, because we don't have enough in there. But the Veteran History Project is so important, and this is worldwide, because there are so many stories untold. And it's getting even harder to get a hold of those ones that are older veterans. I don't know how many World War II veterans we have left here in the state, but I know there's not that many. But it's important for the veterans to share their story, but it's also important for the families. Because what I've found when I've done some of these interviews, oftentimes, is the veterans may or may not have spoken about what they're going to speak with me. For whatever reason, they are comfortable, and I might say something that triggers them to talk about something. And we obviously don't get into, trauma. They don't get into specific details, but it just allows them that opportunity to maybe talk about something that happened that they haven't never shared with their family about. And they have that way to leave their legacy behind. And what ends up happening is, after we do the interview, we submit that to the National Archives, and that stays in there forever. And the family gets a copy on a thumb drive. So they will have that forever and ever and ever, always. And I've had some families reach out, and they're very emotional because they weren't there for the interview, but they went back and watched it. And maybe that veteran is still with us, maybe they're not. And they heard the story for the very first time. So it is so important. I know they're doing a huge push to try to get, I don't know what the number is, but to get even more this year. Another project kind of in conjunction with that is with the Women Veterans Memorial up in Virginia. Phyllis Wilson is the president. I had the privilege of meeting her. She came down to Tampa a couple years ago. She'd kind of heard about our Women Veteran program, and she's like, I want to meet you guys. And you have a huge population of women veterans, and this is what we're trying to do, is get their stories. So she came down and talked about it. And if you ever have the opportunity to go up there, we have our own museum. It's beautiful, and it's digital. So when you do your story, you walk in, your photos there, your story, and you literally can hear the person talking. It is mind-blowing. I wish we had that in every state, but the fact that she has it there, and she still has room for more. So I'm always trying to push that out. So what I do personally when I do interviews, if I have a female veteran, I submit to the National Archives, but I also submit it to the Women's Memorial, or if the veteran is comfortable, I have her go on there. Because what you can do is you can go on there. So if you have a woman that doesn't feel comfortable going on there, but she says it's okay for you to do it, or she passed away and you want to share her story, you can start the process on there, fill in all the blanks that you have. Once you start, you have 90 days to gather all of your facts. So you can reach out to family members and say, hey, what do you remember most? Or was there a story that you want to share? And you can submit that on behalf of that woman veteran. And it goes in there. And it's just another way for families to go back and have that opportunity to, whether, reconnect with their veteran that's no longer with them, or again, hear that story for the first time. And it's very therapeutic for them. And I will say it's very therapeutic for me because, like I said, a lot of times they haven't opened up, or I have veterans that haven't spoken about what they went through, especially our Vietnam era, ever. And I'll meet them at an event or a senior expo, and they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll come to their house and do the interview. I mean, it's just so heartwarming to get them to open up. And oftentimes their family that's with them, usually their spouse, will say they haven't talked about it ever. So to know that they were able to talk about it, they were comfortable enough to share it, and then now we have it for the family, I just can't speak highly enough about it.
I think that is actually a really good idea. And I think you're right, too, with the Vietnam vets. It's very hard for them to open up. My grandpa's a Vietnam vet, and anytime I even try to get information or his stories, he kind of almost shuts down a little bit, because I think he kind of keeps some of those memories buried deep down. But I love the fact, because those stories need to live on, and every person has a different perspective on the same situation. So with that being said, how can someone submit their own stories?
So I will send you the website. But essentially, if you just Google the Library of Congress, it has all the step-by-steps. If you're going to do the interview, there's a lot more. There's the photo permission form. There's a bunch of different liability forms. But if you as a veteran want to go on there, they have different liaisons in different states that you can find and say, oh, this person will do the interview. I'll have veterans that I may not be able to interview them because they're too far up north. And so I have a local guy that works at one of our VFWs, and he travels all over the state. So I can say, hey, I'll send him an email and say, hey, call this veteran, get them signed up. One of the things that I'm pretty proud of that we're starting next month is we got a studio in one of our higher veteran populated areas in Sun City. The American Legion has given us that studio the third Friday of every month. We can bring in however many veterans we can fit in that amount of time. And we have that free space to do the stories. Because sometimes that's a barrier. Where do you do the story at? If they don't want you to come in their home or you're not comfortable, right now they aren't doing it through video. It's very kind of archaic. But what I'm working on with Empath is for us to kind of create our own platform, whether that be just a Zoom, and creating a folder on our website that has our veteran stories. But anybody can go on there and can submit the stories. And the same thing for the Women's Memorial. And then, like I said, the Veteran History Project, the only downside is you have to mail the thumb drive in. And it takes a little bit longer. But I think if we, even for our younger ones, I think they would be more apt to doing something like this, and then they could do it from home or from work if they can't get away. So I'm really trying to push that. We have this kind of pivoting into that, which kind of works out perfectly. But we are running it's called Campaign United Heroes, Hope, and Home. And it's an initiative that Suncoast Hospice Empath Health is running. Our goal is to raise $5,000 to, one, as far as the Veteran History Project, like I said, start kind of our own platform so we can have it on our website. We'd still submit to the National Archives, but we'd have something a little bit more up to date, and that would be on our site. So people could go on there and look at the stories, as well as getting our social workers that trauma-informed training, because that is not something that is usually specific outside of the VA unless you work at a crisis center. So if we can get all of our social workers trained in that, then that will be another, again, if you can't get in with the VA or you just need more care, you see your VA provider for that, and you can also see us. We have virtual options. Most of the VAs have gone back to face-to-face. Some of them do still offer virtual options. And then that money will also help us do more events, give more back. we were able to, I think it was back in August. I literally was only with Empath since May. And they said, we're trying to get a grant, for veterans. How do you think, we could support this? And I was like, we have homeless veterans. They don't have stuff for the cold weather. Even though it may only be 5 days a year, those 5 days are really cold and our shelters fill up really fast. So we were able to get a grant, and we were able to get bags that we stuffed with blankets, mittens, hand warmers, beanies, a bunch of different things. And at one of our stand downs that we had, we were able to give those to those veterans. And it was just another build my cup up opportunity, but another way of us to show our appreciation for the veterans and to be able to give that to them personally was just another thing that I just love about Empath Health. I had an idea and they were like, run with it. We got you. So I love it.
I'm so glad that they're kind of giving you like whatever you want to do, because there's so many good ideas, but there's always obstacles, right, to kind of get it implemented. And I'm so glad you don't have as many obstacles, so you can actually make a greater impact. So with that being said, how can people find you or connect with Empath Health? Like if they want to volunteer or donate, essentially, how can people find you?
So our website, if they just Google empathhealth.org, our site has everything on it. The very top part says how to reach us 24/7. So they'll get an individual on the phone, whether they're needing hospice services, grief services, or they want to volunteer. It also breaks it down. So it'll break it down to the grief services. It'll break it down to the Blue Butterfly, or if it's the perinatal loss. We have the Veteran History Project, and it breaks it down with what we offer for that. So we do the stories, we do the coffee socials, we do other events, to help promote the services that are out there for the VA. And then I'm always posting stuff that we offer Empath as well as other community partners on my LinkedIn, which I haven't pulled up. It's www.linkedin.com/in/Ashley Sard. And as far as I know, I'm the only Ashley Sard out there, unless my husband has something to tell me. But I tell people all the time, like, if you don't have a LinkedIn, you got to get it. And even if you just have the bare bones, just connect with me, because I will share everything that we offer. I will share other event flyers. We have so many nonprofits out there, Tunnels for Towers. We have Action Zone that are trying to help veterans, and they need help with the advertisement. I think that's probably the main struggle that all of us nonprofits have, right, is funding. So trying to get the word out there, trying to get people to help sponsor our events. And I think LinkedIn helps a lot with that, like I said earlier. And then our website also, when you go to the veteran specific one, each coffee social, like for Hillsborough County, they'll all mention me, and they have my email address and my phone number. They can reach me anytime. Carlos covers Pinellas County. It's got all the coffee socials there. And the coffee socials, even though they might seem minute, I have had veterans tell me, like, I don't leave my house except to go to these coffee socials, because I know it'll have other veterans. I might get fed, or I might just get a cup of coffee, but it's something that I look forward to. We have a virtual coffee social too that we share with the entire state, all counties. And that gives veterans the opportunity to hop on and make that connection with for-profits, nonprofits, VA. And they can ask questions. Now, they can't get personal, right? But if they say, hey, I've been dealing with this claim for 6 months and I really need help, we'll have a claims officer and they can connect offline, or if we're sharing resources and events. Bringing those veterans in as well as the community partners is really important. And we record all those. So they can always go back and say, oh man, Ashley was talking about that event, but I don't remember the details. They can go back and look at the recording. So I think just having many different avenues to share the information. I know one thing that worked really well when I was at the VA was sending the postcards. We get those appointment postcards in the mail, but we were able to send those out for the baby showers. We were able to send them out for the veteran resource there. People generally still like receiving mail, and that's not something that I think that they do so much anymore, probably because of the cost of doing it. So I think we just have to get a lot more creative when it comes to how we get that information out there. And I think these podcasts are extremely important, as well as, like you said, liking the specific items on LinkedIn. And then if it is something important, reposting it every week, so it's constantly on your feed and it's right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think we just need to keep reposting, resharing, connecting, and networking, because if someone, like you said, like an issue with the VA claim, someone knows someone, and just networking is just going to always be so huge. I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes, so please, anyone who's listening, please reach out to her. Ashley, it's been a pleasure having you on here. What is one thing that you hope people take away from this episode?
Just one. I think just for veterans to know that there are services out there, and just don't give up. Even if you're not in the state of Florida, if I'm the only person that you know, reach out to me. I am very dedicated. So if I don't know the answer, if I don't have a contact, I'll get it for you. And then for our women veterans, know that we have programs and services just for you, right? Because we have special needs as women veterans, and we are a special population, and we are the fastest growing population out there. So just know that we have support services, and if you need help finding out who your women veteran program is, reach out to me. I can always show you how to look it up on the website and how to get a hold of them directly.